Avidya yatmanyupadhyamane pritirna yavan mai vasudeve namuchyate deha yogena tavat. The translation: when the living entity is covered by the mode of ignorance, he does not understand the individual living being and the supreme living being, and his mind is subjugated by fruitive activity. Therefore, until one has love for Lord Vasudeva, who is none other than myself, he is certainly not delivered from having to accept a material body again and again. So, purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada: when the mind is polluted by fruitive activity, the living entity wants to be elevated from one material position to another. Generally, everyone is involved in working hard day and night to improve his economic condition. Even when one understands the Vedic rituals, he becomes interested in promotion to heavenly planets, not knowing that one's real interest lies in returning home back to Godhead. By acting on the platform of fruitive activity, one wanders throughout the universe in different species and forms. Unless he comes in contact with a devotee of the Lord, a guru, he does not become attached to the service of Lord Vasudeva. Knowledge of Vasudeva requires many births to understand. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Vasudevaha sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlabhaha. After struggling for existence for many births, one may take shelter at the lotus feet of Vasudeva Krishna. When this happens, one actually becomes wise and surrenders unto him. That is the only way to stop the repetition of birth and death. This is confirmed in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, chapter 19, verse 151, in the instructions given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Srila Rupa Goswami at Dashashvamedha Ghat. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. The living entity wanders throughout different planets in different forms and bodies. But if by chance he comes in contact with a bona fide spiritual master, by the grace of the spiritual master, he receives Lord Krishna's shelter and his devotional life begins. So I'm just going to read the translation one more time for 556. When the living entity is covered by the mode of ignorance, he does not understand the individual living being and the supreme living being, and his mind is subjugated by fruitive activity. Therefore, until one has love for Lord Vasudeva, who is none other than myself, he is certainly not delivered from having to accept a material body again and again. So I'd just like to do Mangalarchana. Om Gyan Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Before you continue, and in no way I want to curtail your inspiration,
Sure.
but I would like to introduce you as I waited just to get more people on the call. For those who don't know, Chiti Shakti Devidasi has been practicing Krishna consciousness for over 25 years. He's a disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, serving as one of his caregivers in the last 5 months of his life. She lives with her daughter in London, serving as a preacher and mentor. For many years, she has led a number of projects, including the UK Youth Group, Youth Mentorship, University Preaching, and a weekly Sangha, which she has facilitated for the past 21 years, maybe 22 by now, I guess. Chiti Shakti is a trustee and director at Bhaktivedanta Manor and for the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology in Washington, D.C. She's also co-founder of Mindspace, a mental health service for devotees in the UK. Graduating from Imperial College as a medical doctor and specializing as a consultant psychiatrist, she brings together 2 decades of experience in scientific advances in mental health with Krishna consciousness and connects with diverse audience of celebrities, politicians, healthcare professionals, students, and corporate leaders. Regularly broadcasts for BBC Radio on current affairs, mental health, well-being, and spirituality with over 200 million listeners, and presented her own mental health show for 3 years. She features on TV, newspapers, and magazines, and has contributed to several books, and those are just the material accolades mixed with the spiritual ones. But as you're going to hear, she's a fantastic speaker, and she has a lot of insight in Krishna consciousness. So we are very honored and glad to have you back. Now you can go.
No pressure now. No, that's going to count. So this particular chapter is very philosophy heavy. It's very deep and rich, but also it hits us with some hard truth. And in our world where, especially, I think one of the things we're trying to do as a movement in terms of becoming more mature is balancing the humanity with the divinity. And so I hope that today we can spend a little bit of time doing that, as well as getting to the hardcore stuff also. So this, just the verse, when the living entity is covered by the mode of ignorance, he does not understand the individual living being and the supreme living being, and his mind is subjugated by fruitive activity. Therefore, until one has love for Lord Vasudev, who is none other than myself, he is certainly not delivered from having to accept a material body again and again. So as we know, Lord Rishabh is speaking to his sons and trying to get them to really understand who they are, who God is, and what this world is in the context of that particular relationship. This word ignorance that's used here, if you look at the word ignorance, the very strong core of it is ignore. Okay, and that's essentially what we ask Krishna when we turn our backs on him, when we decide to come here, when we say, okay, well, I'd like an existence separate from my original nature. I'd like an existence where I don't make you the center of my world. We can't completely forget, just like you can't forget to breathe, right? Somehow or another, breathing breaks through. We can't actually have Krishna completely removed from our life, but we can ignore him. So this ignorance is related to kind of what we're saying is, I just somehow or another need some space from you, Krishna. And for him to help us, because his mood is always to serve us, for him to help us to forget him, he also has to make sure we forget ourselves and forget our relationship with him. Because when we only forget a person and we still remember ourselves, then, and we know who we are still haunted by the memories of the relationship and our experiences of the relationship. Or reminisce if it was a good one and you lost the person. But if you want to forget the person, then you're haunted by those memories. So Krishna wants to, he's the way ignorance has been set up, whether it's through the modes, whether it's through our narthas, whichever framework we use, Krishna essentially creates an environment and a mindset. This verse very much focuses on the state of the mind as well. That enables us to be ignorant, avidya. This word, it's not using the word tamagun like the mode of ignorance. Using this word avidya is used in this verse, which means this ignorance or forgetfulness of who am I, who is Krishna, and who am I to him, what's our relationship. But this just covers, what our mind ends up getting covered with is, if we lose our actual identity, if we forget our actual identity, because we have an identity, because we are, it's then inevitable that the first thing we're going to do is try and find an identity again. Okay, so this fruitive activity that talks about, when we think of fruitive and we think of ignorance, it's quite heavy, right? Nobody likes to think of themselves as fruitive, especially once we become devotees. We don't like the idea of, I hanker to have things or be something other than a devotee, or that I'm ignorant of my relationship with Krishna. So, but if we have ignored or forgotten, and it's very deep rooted, and it's been there for a long time, as we will have done because we're here, our actual identity, then it's inevitable, because it's natural for us to have individuality and identity, we will seek it out. So we spend a lot of time establishing a new identity, or getting comfortable in the identity we have, or perhaps even hankering to get rid of the current one that we have. Okay, so we spend a lot of time trying to just get comfortable in being. And we do this through a variety of ways. We do this through acquisition of new objects, acquisition of new people, formation of new relationships, and creation of new circumstances. So if we unpack this word of fruitive activity, this, when the mind, in the first line of the purport, Prabhupada says, when the mind is polluted by fruitive activity, that means the mind also has a pure state, an unpolluted state as well, right? A clean state. When water is polluted, it's dirty, it's smelly, it doesn't have its real effect, which is to clean. When the mind is in its pure state, it's a bridge to surrender. And when the mind is really polluted, or the other word that's used in this verse is subjugated, so under duress of fruitive activity, it's become submissive to fruitive activity. And that fruitive activity, what is the fruit that we're trying to get? We are just basically trying to mimic in some small way that which is natural to us, is finding our identity, or knowing our identity, and finding an object or person to connect with us in such a way that we can have a relationship with them, which is boundaryless, loving, and unconditional. Okay, so, and it's what's really Prabhupada is emphasizing in this purport is that even when one understands the Vedic rituals, he says he becomes interested in promotion to heavenly planets, not knowing that one's real interest lies in returning home back to Godhead. So there are so many distractions, even once we take to Krishna consciousness, because there is the human side of being a devotee in this world, and then there is our eternal side of being a devotee. And I can see this call is full of very serious devotees who have been practicing for a long time. So maybe it's something that you have seen around you. Maybe you recognize that we can get quite busy with, again, projecting that same desire to have an identity and individuality within our devotee communities, more than even establishing our actual, or uncovering our identity in relationship with Krishna. And actually, in some ways, it's easier to do. So it's almost easier to be deluded in a devotional community because the covering is more subtle, because our external identities, the things that we do, line up with what Shastra says. It lines up with Prabhupada's instructions of what it means to be a good devotee externally. But it's still thick enough to obstruct our actual relationship with Krishna. It can be still thick enough to obstruct our actual relationship with Krishna because we may take more shelter of how we are perceived to be religious or devotional, or a good person, or free of suffering in our community, or what the current trend is in the movement in terms of measuring what is seen as devotional success. Let me just elaborate on that a little bit more. There are different trends depending on where we are at as a community in terms of our own maturation and collective consciousness, in terms of how success in devotional life is measured. Is success in devotional life measured by how many followers someone has, how many classes they give, how many new devotees they make, how many hours of service that they do, how meek they are, how much they get on with things even in the face of criticism, how much you can talk down to them and tell them off and yet they still continue to do their service? Is it measured by how they dress? You see these so many different ways. Is the current climate that, okay, we're not going to have, we're not going to put so much emphasis on productivity and we're going to put more emphasis on purity? So it's there's the impact of the collective consciousness of our communities. Where is the priority? How are we measuring devotional success? Because we may, Prabhupada's made such a systematic, he's given us such a systematic approach and duplicated it so strongly in every temple. The routine and the structure is there. You can have the routine and the structure, which is there to facilitate purity. Our Krishna consciousness sandwich, where you start with devotion, devotional activities, your sadhana, you have your service in the middle of the day, and you end with sadhana. But if the overarching message in the community is that the success of your spiritual life will be measured on some external factor, then that often speaks much more loudly than the other facilities that have been enabled, especially if those messages echo similar messages to what we've heard in the past, perhaps while we're growing up, and especially for those devotees who are brought up in the movement. What other messages have they been brought up with other than that Krishna loves you unconditionally, and that your measure of advancement in spiritual life is taste for hearing and chanting, but also the strength of that taste in hearing and chanting is also very clearly shown. And Satchidananda Maharaj talked about this on Friday, in your cooperation with others and the harmony in those relationships. And that harmony doesn't just come like this, it requires some effort. So I think we have to be careful as devotees because, in this purport, Srila Prabhupada, and this verse also speaks to this, but Prabhupada elaborates that unless a devotee comes in contact with a guru who plants this seed, okay? So Lord Chaitanya says this, if by chance he comes in contact with a bona fide spiritual master, by the grace of the spiritual master, he receives Lord Krishna's shelter and his devotional life begins. This Shraddha, this faith that through pure devotional service, through making an endeavor, a consistent endeavor to align my body and mind and words and my motives to reawaken my relationship with Krishna, discover who Krishna is and who I am, is more than enough and fulfills all other obligations and will be ultimately most satisfying. When that seed is then planted and we're watering it through our various stages of devotional service, how much are we getting distracted still by the very subtle coverings that convince us that we're being a devotee because it's being acknowledged or validated in this world through measures which are not in line with what Shastra says is signs of spiritual advancement. So this seed that's planted before, and it's very, if we read Madhurya Kadambini, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur unpacks this, because when I read this, by chance he comes in contact with a bona fide spiritual master, and by the grace of the spiritual master he receives Lord Krishna's shelter. Lord Chaitanya is saying this word chance, we don't like it as devotees, right? When we take to a spiritual path, we often try to get away from this word chance, saying nothing's chance. Not even a blade of grass moves but without Krishna's permission. Right? So why is Lord Chaitanya talking about chance? How can anything happen by chance? So surely I did something in my previous life. Maybe it was those temples I visited, or maybe I was a kind person. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, actually, bhakti is independent. She's as independent as Krishna. And because she's independent, there is no material circumstance that invites her into our heart. Because pious activities, material. Knowledge, material. Srila Prabhupada says in this purport, giving Bhagavad Gita 7:19 as Shastric evidence, that knowledge of Vasudev requires many births to understand. Okay? Just because we know there's a bank account with millions waiting for us, it doesn't mean that we know how to access it or even how to use the money when we get it. Okay? So this is the difference between even knowing and worshipping God versus that seed of pure Shraddha, pure devotional service, that the Guru, what appears to be chance, it appears to be chance because we cannot understand the free will of Bhakti Devi, which she hands over to the devotees who own her in her heart. So this chance, this seed is planted. But after this seed is planted and we say yes to Krishna, what Prabhupada is, what I hear him saying in this is that we have to keep saying yes over and over again. Because when the mind has been subjugated and polluted because it's not acting as it should be, polluted by constantly trying to either change our identity, get comfortable in this identity, lose this identity. Impersonalism is losing of this identity. It's very distracting. It's very distressing. But when it's very subtle, it's deluding as well. Okay, and deludes us, and when we're deluded, we find it very easy to delude others also. Many of our problems in our various hierarchies in our community have arisen because when people behave improperly continuously, it's often because they are deluding themselves of something, of either improper behavior, improper actions, improper words, and they're doing it consistently as a means to justify. And they've found something in scripture that justifies it. So there's this saying yes to Krishna has to be repetitive, consistent. I mean, we hear about it in so many different manifestations, like when we are chanting. What's attentive chanting? Attentive chanting is saying yes to Krishna and my relationship with Krishna, and saying, for the time being, at least while I'm chanting, mind, please don't be subjugated and polluted by all these other things I've been doing, other identities I've been trying to acquire, other ways I've been trying to mirror that which is me in this world. So there's often something that is taking us to a point of distraction. And when I said I wanted to kind of use today, I know it's early in the morning, and I know Saratma Prabhu said it's a farm and devotees are maybe doing other things, but I know some devotees are also sitting down and really hearing. And there's not really anything in this purport or verse that is really new for anyone. So I just thought we could use some time to, as individuals, remove this ignorance together, because we have the magical effect of the process itself in terms of chanting, hearing, remembering, that quite literally dissolve this avidya, this ignorance, because there's an uncovering. They're like, chanting and associating with devotees. It's like the soap in water that cleans the dust from the mirror of the heart. But there's also an active process to it in terms of when we do it consciously. And that's not just consciously allowing the processes to work, but consciously seeking out what could be a blind spot. It's like when we're driving, right? When you drive, you know there's a blind spot in your mirror. That mirror shows you a certain amount, but there is a blind spot, which requires us to very consciously say, I'm going to turn my head a little bit, because I know if I turn my head, in England, we turn our head to the right. You guys probably turn your head to the left to look at that blind spot. Okay, it requires some endeavor, right? But you know it will save you from danger later on. If you just that one little endeavor. So I wanted to use today to maybe some of today, not too long, that we can together maybe help each other to actively remove, conscientiously look at perhaps our blind spot in some area of our life. Because usually the area of our life where we may be perhaps thinking, okay, I don't see how this is contradictory to devotional principles. And yet it's distracting us. And distracting us not to a point of where it brings us taste and joy in our japa and in our hearing, but perhaps to a point where it's even distracting us from our hearing and our japa. Or perhaps it's becoming a cause of discord in our relationships with other devotees. Okay, so with this in mind, just to give it a little bit more context, when we're looking at the stages from Shraddha to Prem, and this is like a mountain to climb, Shraddha to Nishtha is like a dissolution of all these temporary identities we've given ourselves. And from Nishtha to Prem is an awakening of the real identity. So it is hard. One of the things that is hard and is an uphill climb from Shraddha to Nishtha is that we will feel threatened a lot of the time, because our identity as we've known it for so long is often threatened, right? When we came to Krishna consciousness, so many of us had to shed so many things and acquire so many other aspects to our identity. And some were easy, some were a little harder, but this continues. So right now, it's also continuing to varying degrees in each of our lives. For some, it's very gross. For some, it's more subtle. Okay, so I would like each of us to ask yourself, and I'm going to ask this same question in two ways, just because people understand language in different ways. So for yourself, if you have pen and paper or phone, whatever you type into or write into, right now, in terms of who you are in this world, whether it's in our community, whether it's in your working environment, your particular service, your home life, whatever it is, financially, what aspect of your human self is currently feeling threatened? Okay, in some ways you can know that that aspect of you is feeling threatened is it's bothering you, it's on your mind to the point of distraction. Okay, you're feeling uncomfortable about it. What is making you feel threatened? What is making you feel like if this is not taken care of, it makes me feel like I'm being destroyed? Just write that down. What is, taking you to that point? Could be something very simple, maybe something that's even natural. Maybe the body's getting older and it feels a little strange. Hey, hang on a minute, I don't have as much energy. My brain's not as sharp, or my joints ache, or I don't look as good as I used to. Maybe it's something as simple and organic as that. Maybe your hormones have made your mind go a little crazy and you're like, wow, I used to, really be able to get it together when times of stress, and now I seem to fly off the handle. Maybe there's a financial threat. Maybe there's a residential threat. Who knows? Just whatever it is right now, what is currently making you feel threatened? In this present, anartha nivritti, removal of unwanted things, getting our mind and heart back to a pure state means, you might feel a bit threatened for a little while in letting go of the old. Okay. A deep breath, because it is probably uncomfortable. As you acknowledge and write on paper, and look at it in black and white, or whatever color you've written in, What is making you feel threatened? Face what you perceive to be your enemy. Krishna, in his loving humility, grants us our wish of forgetting him and our relationship with him and who we are to him. He loses something too, but in his loving humility, he makes arrangements, the exact arrangements that we've asked for, so that we can be in ignorance, in what we perceive to be happy ignorance. But then we turn to him and we say, remove it. So this pain we're feeling of feeling threatened is arranged by him. Whoever the instrument is, Krishna's arranged it to pull us closer. So what might he be trying to teach? What might he be trying to teach through this discomfort, through this, what's making us feel threatened? Sometimes when we are being taught something new, even if it's good for us, even if it's coming from a loving place, it can feel threatening because we have to drop something else, right? If your hands are already full and someone's offering you something better, we may be more scared of putting down what we already have to accept what we're being given. Okay, so what might he be trying to teach? Is there something that he wants us to accept, absorb into ourselves that we haven't really been able to digest? And what might he be inviting us to let go of? There's no one else. It's just you and your bit of paper. Nothing to feel shy or ashamed about. And I pray that everybody has someone who's dear and close to them that you can actually later on share, because then you will drop so much.
So is that the second question? Is what is Krishna
trying to teach you?
Us?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Through that, yeah. Sometimes we have to move away from that feeling of being threatened to actually see, what am I trying to let, right? Krishna felt threatened when Mother Yashoda was chasing him with the stick for, breaking the makhan pots. He felt threatened. She was trying to teach him something. And then the third part, is there anything you remember hearing or reading from Guru that can help you lighten the load of the importance you've given this area of your life? Okay, just thinking. So the reason I'm coming back to anything you can remember hearing or reading or being told by Guru that can help you to lighten the load of the importance you've given this area of your life is because the Guru doesn't just wake up bhakti. The Guru has an integral part in allowing, and if we are willing to receive, for the bhakti lata bij to actually grow into that lata, that creeper, and bear the fruits. And our receptivity to Guru's instruction, when consistent and ever increasing, means a very consistent, ever increasing growth in Krishna consciousness. But when it's in stops and starts, which is usually the case because we go through anartha nivritti and we go through unsteady and steady bhajan kriya, it needs conscious, again, revisiting. Because that's why when we often get certain instructions, we either don't hear it, we either think it's not for me, or we don't understand it and then just file it. So is there anything you remember hearing or reading? And the reason I'm asking this is also as we go through this, remember, knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness comes from Krishna. So as you churn, as you try and look at your blind spot, Krishna will also reciprocate and open up areas of knowledge, remembrance that may be required right now. Maybe some of these answers you're stuck with, maybe they're a little hard, maybe they're emotional. It's okay. when the mind no longer wants to be subjugated, it has to fight back, right? Fighting back hurts. So I just, in reference to this particular verse and purport, I just do want to close the loop here a little bit with whichever way you find comfortable and you find yourself having a willingness to do. I know it helps me a lot is when I take an active, conscientious approach to removing ignorance rather than just letting the process passively work in the background and hoping for the best. I never get in my car and just press the accelerator hoping for the best. I drive, I steer, I plan a route, I reroute. I make sure also I'm comfortable for the journey, have my snacks, ones that don't get the car too messy, you know, make sure I'm warm enough. So this is we want to align ourselves, position ourselves that we are comfortable enough that we can endeavor consistently in actively removing this forgetfulness, this ignorance, but at the same time, not so comfortable that we don't want to get out of the car, right? So, okay, I'm not going to ask people to consciously share their examples because I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but we've got plenty because I do want to hear from you. So many of my seniors are here on this call. I see all of you and I love you and appreciate you for your support. Yes, if you'd like to share anything, comment, question, whatever you like, the floor is yours.
Can I say that you open a can of worms that cannot be closed again?
Great.
Okay, I mean, I wrote, even before you asked people to write, I wrote about 10 different things that I will have to listen to this. Fortunately, we record, we stream this directly into our YouTube channel, so I'll have a chance to hear it again. If you don't mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would like to ask a few things from you. You mentioned harmony in relationships as we hear Prabhupada said, your love will be shown, for me, will be shown by the way you cooperate with each other. So you spoke about harmony and cooperation. Yet, I don't think is an integral part of our sadhana.
So what is?
It's not an integral part of our sadhana. So do you think it should be?
Yeah, we've managed to make preaching an integral part of our sadhana. So the reason I think we find it hard to make harmonious relationships a part of an integral part of our sadhana is it's hard because it's hard. And it's hard because our environment and our upbringing and Kali Yuga is not designed for that. Kali Yuga is defined as the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. It's interesting that Prabhupada's instruction, his final instructions, is to do the opposite, to go against the tide, saying be honest and cooperate. What, in a climate of dishonesty and a climate of quarrel, you want us to do the exact opposite? Saying you can do that, that will attract mercy because we're swimming upstream. That is quite literally what we're doing. So, and this is not something an individual can do on their own. We have to do this together, and it takes mistakes before we get to a harmonious place. But people make mistakes, they get scared off by their mistakes, and then they avoid the relationship. Good relationships that have been going on for a long time and have lasted, have also gone through difficult periods. You know, we have a relationship with this body. We live in this body. We have a relationship with our own minds. We have relationships with people. when we have a good relationship, whether it's with the body, whether it's with our mind, whether it's with another person, whether it's with our home environment, it is inevitable we would have come across challenges. And there would have been periods where we need to invest more time. There would have been periods where we would have made mistakes. And then we find that balance. So I think we often lack harmony because when things get difficult, we have a tendency to avoid out of fear of not making offenses and not getting hurt. And I mean, I haven't had a chance to hear all of Satchidananda Maharaj's class, but I know he was speaking about offenses and the corrective measures for various offenses. And the offenses can also be flipped and looked at also as if you do the opposite of every offense, then you're living in a mood of Vaishnava seva. So yeah, I think endeavoring to have harmonious relationships and not having an unrealistic expectation that a harmonious relationship and a long-lasting harmonious relationship is going to be free of disagreement and conflict brings about some sort of maturity.
If I can be a little candid here, my wife always tells me that I should think of being a representative of Prabhupada and always give a good example. However, my nature, if I can define it as such, is very eccentric and extemporaneous and tries to find the absurdity and humor in things. So I'm not a very good example. And it makes me quite uncomfortable to think that people have to actually follow me and I have to give a good example. It makes me feel like, I have to be someone else. Just like if you ask my wife to give a lecture, she would rather spend a year in Guantanamo Bay that give even a lecture to two people. So it's not a nature, so how do we deal with the things that we also, this is another topic that may expand. How do we understand our nature? Because a lot of people talk about their nature. My, let's say, party line for that one is first you do what everybody else does. You wash pots, you go to the programs, you chant your rounds, you do what you're told, and then your nature will find you. Don't try to define your nature before your nature comes up. But honestly, after many decades, seems like I do have a nature, but is that my real nature?
Okay.
Sorry about the curveball.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to find a succinct way to answer it because there are so many different aspects to our nature. There's personality. There's the nature that fits in terms of your lifestyle, what kind of ashram would suit you. There's the aspect of your nature in terms of the kind of occupation. And I don't necessarily mean how you earn money. There's so many occupations we have. What do we fill our time with? Where do we find meaning and purpose? Okay. And then, so you put personality along with occupation and purpose, along with the kind of lifestyle we want. And you can either wait for that to figure itself out, or you can pursue it and figure it out. But either way, it's still temporary, which is why this question is so important. Which area of your life is making you feel threatened? Because it's inevitable then, if you try to do anything other than that, you will feel threatened to the degree that we will feel threatened to the degree that we are not aware of our actual identity. So if we are so very rooted in our identities here to a point where there's no awareness at all of anything else, then we are in the highest states of anxiety and the highest states of feeling threatened. But Srila Prabhupada gives the solution. He says, first you serve according to your nature. Then as the process sets to work, you end up being able to do anything, because our primary way of deriving happiness isn't through engaging this nature, but it's actually through being in connection with our real nature. So, there are classes. I know some devotees talk about being uncomfortable or comfortable with the uncomfortable and stretching ourselves. What it means to, like you said, your wife would rather, I can't remember where you said, but go somewhere far away and live in seclusion rather than give class to two people. for somebody else, that would be easy. But there's a, first of all, do I need to stretch that area? Is it necessary? It may not be necessary for her to give class. Does she really need to do that for her Krishna consciousness? And first of all, if it's necessary, then how much am I ready to stretch? How much am I ready to stretch? Because we all know our capacity. And then there's others who want to stretch themselves, and Krishna holds you back. Krishna holds you back. But then Krishna is, when I think about Krishna holding us back, I think of that call a catapult?
Slingshot?
Slingshot, that's it. So what's a catapult then?
Catapult is this wooden thing from the Middle Ages that throws
Okay.
flaming rocks.
Okay, so slingshot, you put a rock in a slingshot, right? Normally when we think of being held back, we think I'm being stopped from doing something. Okay, I'm being obstructed. But with a slingshot, you're holding back. But what's happening is you're creating this potential energy. Those of you who do a bit of physics, there's potential energy being stored in that elastic band, okay? That's pulling back that stone. And this is what Krishna does, because his timing is perfect for things. Sometimes we want to stretch ourselves more, and we're finding it's not. Why is Krishna not letting me do it? Why is Guru not allowing me to do it? What's happening is Krishna's waiting for the perfect time. And it's like he's pulling us back, collecting momentum. And then when he lets go, we fly. We fly. So I know you threw me a curveball, but I think I've curved the other way. So did I answer your question at all?
I have to listen to it again. Yes, I think you did.
Sure.
It's about externals and hard work. Is hard work an external? I know many devotees, quite a few actually, that catalog or qualify their success based on spiritual life, based on how much sweat they get out of what they're doing. So, and others, they write, or there's no sweat involved. Apparently, there is no work, but also there apparently no work for a judge when he's actually just listening and bangs a hammer once in a while. So it doesn't seem like much work. The guy who cleans the courtroom is a real hero, right? Because according to externals, he's the one doing all the work. So how do we qualify our success or our endeavor based on a measure that just is how do you say is available to everyone? I mean, I can't. A physicist may be able to show an equation, but to those who are not qualified, won't make any sense, won't make any difference, won't be prove anything. So how can you prove it? Is there such a thing that you can prove to everyone that it's not just by externals? Because some people do not believe it.
Mm-hmm. There is no real external measure of love, because that's what we're measuring. That's what it means to be Krishna conscious. How much has someone developed their love for Krishna? There's no external measure, because you say, the judge looks lazy. They're just banging a hammer once in a while. But that judge has worked hard in terms of applying their intellect or studying or whatever they had to do before they became a judge. They also carry the weight of the decisions they make karmically on behalf of the people they make decisions for. Okay, the person who mops the floor, physically works hard, applies his body, but goes home and forgets about the courtroom. He's got nothing to do with anybody in the courtroom or the decisions made that day. So on the human side, there is no real measure. I think when it comes to hard work or any of these parameters, this is why this question was raised, is what external measurements are we using to judge our spiritual life? Because actually, the only measure of love that is very unequivocally given in Shastra, in terms of our relationship with Krishna and a measure of our affection for Krishna, is how much does the heart rejoice when we're hearing? How much does the heart rejoice when we're chanting? Because a measure of someone's love for another person, even if you're looking at harmonious human relationships, is there joy and delight when we see the person, when we hear about the person, when we think of the person. And that is not the feature or the quality of a hardworking person, the lazy person, the intellectual person, the male, the female, the particular ashram or varna. Doesn't belong to anyone. That simply belongs to the person who's given their heart to Krishna, who's ready to let this go and say yes every time, despite the fears, despite the threats. There's this trust that I know Krishna's got my back.
I will try to be generous and give others the opportunity to. I still have 10 or 20 more things to ask you, but I will let others do that.
Okay. So I think there was, Gita, Nagari, Eco Farm and Sanctuary, you had your hand up. I'll just call you based on what you're labeled if I don't know who you are. Sorry. You had your hand up, but you put it down. Did you still want to say something?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhu. My name is Parameswari. I also there on my phone, but I'm also in the temple. Anyway, yeah, I type it in the chat because when Savatma Prabhu asked the question about stretching yourself, stretching outside of your nature, outside of your comfort zone. So I wanted to ask, is this a misconception to think that the more I stretch myself outside my comfort zone, the more mercy I would get to advance in spiritual life? And those who do not stress as much won't get advanced as fast. Like, is that, like, again, it's coming back to the point of the measurement aspect. Like, if I stress myself more in my comfort zone, I will get more mercy to advance. Is that true? Or
Well, the thing is, we don't want to stretch ourselves to the point of breaking. Even a rubber band has a potential to be stretched. You know, this is why even when gurus, mentors, shiksha gurus are instructing those who are mature and have insight, they don't want to stretch someone to a point of breakage, right? Unless they have the adhikar to mop up the breakage, okay? Because sometimes people will say, you know, Prabhupada, you know, he got these young boys and girls to do these huge, massive things, pioneering things. Prabhupada also had the adhikar to, even if they did nothing, to take them back to Godhead, even if their service. But so we have to be realistic. We don't want to unnecessarily, almost as an ego trip, give ourselves more responsibility than we've been asked to do just because we think, actually, if I take myself to breaking point, that is what's going to attract Krishna's mercy. Or if I give myself so much austerity and deprive myself of pleasure so much that it will attract Krishna's mercy because I'm proving to him that I'm not interested in anything. You know, Krishna says so many different things in Bhagavatam in terms of the human side of living in this world. I think he speaks about, in the 11th canto, he speaks about one particular Brahmin who, and one of the things Krishna describes about this person is that he's really miserly. And he describes the miserliness not in terms of just, oh, he's, you know, doesn't spend or anything like that. He actually talks about the miserliness in relationship to the person's attitude to themselves. He said he's so miserly, he doesn't even allow himself basic sense gratification to keep the body and the mind together. Right? So Krishna's not like, oh, the person who breaks themselves is going to be most dear to me. I don't think that's written anywhere. You know, as you surrender to me, I reward you accordingly. He didn't say the more you break yourself, the more I reward you. We're not meant to be a movement of workaholics. This is
thank you, Prabhu. Yeah. Can I ask on just another follow-up question about that? So how do we know when we stay too much in our comfort zone, and like what is the line between sort of trying a little bit more to extend ourselves, being a little bit more selfless, and at the same time, yeah, what is the balance?
Our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health should be good. Whatever we neglect, it will come up later on. You can't put 3 dishes on a stove and only pay attention to 1 or 2. The other one will burn and it will cry out for your attention and may even set the whole house on fire. So our spiritual health, our mental health, and physical health are all good markers of where we might be lacking balance or need to pay a little bit more attention. Sometimes it's so simple we miss it. There's no magic voice that's going to descend from the heavens. Krishna's given us everything. We just have to kind of be a bit more attentive to what he's trying to show us. And this is why we come back to this making harmonious relationships part of our sadhana. It is those around us who see things before we do, right? A mother will notice her child is sick before even the child really notices. You know, our friends and family may notice we're getting irritable, or we may have lost weight, or we're a bit weak, or, you know, we're not our usual self. This is where relationships are important. We need those sounding boards. We need those non-judgmental ears and hearts and loving arms to hug us. We need these things. And where we have those things, then there's less offense. Okay? Hare Krishna. Jiva Pandit Prabhu, and then Prem Kishori, please.
Hare Krishna, good morning. Can you hear me?
Hare Krishna, yes, I can.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for the class. I really appreciate you making time for us today. You made a point earlier in your class that I found interesting. You said that, at least this is what I heard, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You made the point that we want a relationship with Krishna that's boundaryless. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yeah, in the sense that love knows no bounds.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious.
We're used to boundaries of time and space, right? And we, in our practice of our Krishna consciousness, we define often our services and our sadhana based on the boundaries of time and space. I can do this if I'm here, I can do this at this time. But actually, as we become more closely connected and devotional, there's that desire to serve, that desire to connect, breaks all boundaries and limitations. Okay, there's no limitations to what connects us to Krishna, and there's no limitations to connecting the heart. And Lord Chaitanya serves the perfect example. Right? There's nothing that held back his feelings for Krishna. So this is what I mean by boundaryless. But this is we're now entering the realm of like bhav and prem, right? It's not something, we have to start with what we've already got and where we're already at. I mean, there's an interesting question in the chat about, isn't it only Guru and Krishna that can measure our real advancement? With the reason our acharyas have written books like Madhurya Kadambini is so we have some measure for ourselves in terms of where we're going and where we're at. And that's why this point about taste and attraction and attachment to the process and the object of our love comes up time and time again. We also have to know how much is Krishna letting me in, how much closer am I getting to surrendering. There's got to be some measure, otherwise we'll just be lost. We can't be just told, oh, you love me this much and I love you this much. There's got to be some awareness on our part. It's a two-way street. So Prem Kishori?
Hare Krishna, Chiti Shakti Mataji. Thank you so much for the class. So while I was writing, I actually gave a title to what I wrote from your class, if I may share. That's not my question, that's just an appreciation. The search of identity in the wilderness of the city of 9 gates. So, okay, you said that the exercise you made us do my question is from there, that okay, what do I feel threatened in my human self right now, which could serving as a major distraction even going forward. So I actually see clarity, and I don't want to like blame myself or blame anyone. It's just like a clarity that what I really feel threatened, or maybe which prohibits me, because I was supposed to go to temple this weekend, but that really prohibited me or served as a firewall to even go to the temple, is that there is this concept of, I just wrote, so I'm going to read it, this full-time devotees and part-time devotees in ISKCON. I have been hearing Srila Prabhupada for 21 years. I've never heard him say this, full-time devotees and part-time devotees, but I'm one of the younger ones. If you have heard, please let me know. So, okay, so this is understanding, or maybe I need clarity in making a perspective that if one is a part-time devotee, which according to me, my understanding is not living in the temple full time and has, like, I'm a part-time devotee because I live outside, I have my life outside, I have my children, I have my job, I have my house, I have my car, I have my bank balance, I have my parents. I have a life outside, I'm not just in the temple. So the part-time devotee needs to make up for the full-time devotee by some sort of contribution, be it, or you have to prove yourself. Like you're saying, Prabhupada will take us back, or he has an adhikar even if I didn't do anything. I just sat on my couch and chanted. Versus, but then there's this concept. There is this concept, and I am facing it for years maybe. That a devotee, a part-time devotee, needs to make up for the full-time devotee by some sort of contribution. Basically, mostly it's how much money can you contribute rather than how much service or what you can do. And the so-called full-time devotee is very busy to give the time to others because they're serving Krishna. So there's no time. I'm bringing this up because I want to understand what you mean to teach us when you say collective consciousness of the community that we live in, that we are actually using as a marker to calibrate our progress in Krishna consciousness as a family, as a community, which I think Bhaktitirtha Maharaj was a champion of. So, but then there's this sense of belongingness in a so-called part-time devotee. And that sense of belongingness is completely shattered by this concept. And then this concept of that if I say this is my temple, I belong there. So that can turn sand into gold. But now this belongingness is threatened because of this perspective, which I for a long time thought was only my cup of tea, but it's becoming very clear that it is not really just my cup of tea, but there are more than one place. So am I denying the responsibility of my feeling because it's so easy to gaslight on someone else, or is there some solidity and thing because it really affected, I did not go, and which is an effect, right? Because it's like a hospital. Prabhupada said ISKCON is like a hospital where a person suffering in the material world will go and get treatment, but then sometimes it feels like that there is no bed in the hospital. We are on a divert. So what do you do?
What's your question?
This is my question, that the sense of belongingness and then this firewall of this is a devotee who is full-time and this is a devotee who is a part-time, and there is no connection because you're a part-time devotee, you're outside. And how do you actually measure? Two-part question. One is that I think I'm high in emotions now.
Yeah.
Anyway, that how do you this sense of belongingness is threatened. So how do what is my perspective that needs to change, and how do and what is the best way? Please teach what do you mean by saying that collective consciousness of a community? What are the measures that we are taking?
Well, you've given the example of that. If you're saying that what you're picking up is that there is a distinction of people's spiritual advancement, this is what you're picking up. Okay, I don't know whether this is true or not, but you're picking up that someone's spiritual advancement is based on how much time they give in the temple. Then that is an example of there's a collective consciousness. If I sat here and said, who actually specifically said that to you? How many times have you heard it? This and that, you may not be able to give me details, but it's something you're picking up. But then there's also the aspect on your side, you're also choosing to accept it.
Okay.
When actually it's factually not correct, right? There's not a measure in Shastra of if you give more time to this particular activity or this particular situation or this particular temple, that equals more devotion. Right? This is actually one of the ways that Srila Rupa Goswami defines the beginning stages or the neophyte stage of devotional service is seeing distinctions and measures based on externals. Okay, but coming on this topic of collective consciousness, how do we change our perspective? There are so many things in the collective consciousness, so many things, different messages all at the same time. Yes, there might be this part-time and full-time devotee thing. There's also things in the collective consciousness about gender roles and different ashrams and different varnas, you know, we've got loads of stuff. But in the collective consciousness, there's also a lot of purity and a lot of harmony, and those who seek to serve and unify and make Krishna available beyond all boundaries. So we, you know, what we keep going back to in the collective consciousness is probably says more about us. Okay, so you kept bringing up this sense of belonging, and because you've been so open, I hope you don't mind me unpacking it a little bit.
No.
So clearly the sense of belonging is very, very important to you, you know, and I just wonder if that sense of belonging is something that isn't just coming up for you in devotional life, but has come up for you before in other areas of your life as well, right? So just maybe look at that a little bit more closely, because our mind acts like a Velcro, okay, or a magnet, that what impressions we've got from there before attract similar things to the degree that we are either attached or averse to them. So if we like some of the impressions we've got from our past, we will draw them to us because we like them, okay? And we'll find those situations. If we've had experiences in the past that we don't want, we fear them. And our fear takes us exactly to those situations. Why? Because sometimes Krishna wants to show us, okay, you need to see this because this fear is blocking you from actually letting me in. So drop it. Or he's showing it to us because he wants to show us, no, it's not that bad anyway. It's not as scary as you think. Right? Because actually, there is nowhere that Krishna isn't. You know, if you go on, he's in every atom and molecule. He's even sitting in the sponge of my microphone here. Okay? He's in our heart. So there is nothing, no one's idea can keep us separate from him. But if we allow someone's idea to keep us separate from him, then that becomes our Maya. Right? There's I don't know if you've seen it. There's that video of Bhaktivedanta Maharaj speaking about his interactions of Srila Prabhupada. And he challenges Srila Prabhupada about racism in the movement. And Prabhupada, Guru Maharaj joined in the 70s, you know, and that racism was coming in. He was one of the few devotees in a black body, and he was educated, and not just basic education. He was very highly educated. And so he expressed this to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, yes, where there's material consciousness, there will be this kind of nonsense. But to the degree that you allow it to bother you, to that degree, it's your nonsense. Are you going to let it get in the way when you know that it's actually not a real barrier? And this is what fear is. It's irrational. It's not based in reality. The only way to overcome the irrational is to live in the rational. Okay? Does that make sense?
A lot. Thank you. Thank you.
So Ratna Prabhu, Kamania's got her hand up. Do we have time, or?
If time is not an issue for you, it's definitely not an issue for us.
Okay, as long as you're okay, that's fine. Yeah, I can definitely do another 5-10 minutes. Kamania, go ahead. You don't have your hand up? Oh, sorry. I guess no one has their hand up. Let me just check the chat then. Okay, so sorry, there's a question. What if someone knows their own limitations due to age and state of physical health, but get advised to move to the other side of the world? Interesting question. I would like to understand whether it's advice or whether it's an instruction, okay? Because the two are very different things. Advice is, you know, generally for me, I think of advice as, you know, take it or leave it, because people give advice based on also how much we've revealed to them. Okay, and also on their level of insight. So I think it's very important to maybe just try and understand a bit more about whether you were just advised or recommended to do it. And then there's instruction. But even if it's instruction, there's got to be clarification. Okay, Prabhupada says this, that when the guru instructs, the disciple should get clarification on the instruction so that it can be executed properly. So get clarification, because either the person who's instructed you maybe isn't aware of age or physical challenges, or they are, and they may have some insight that you haven't discussed yet. Because remember, the guru is accessing Shakti, and not just the guru, but devotees who are very advanced, they're accessing a Shakti that's beyond just the normal human and material workings. Otherwise, none of us would be here. If we were just dealing with just people who were just materially powerful, there's devotees in this room, in this Zoom room, who've been here for 40, 50 years, some of them. And they wouldn't be here if it was just about normal material power. They'd be in politics or, owning Tesla or something like that, where there's a lot of money and things. We're not. So there are different. When we take to devotional service, we are almost living in two parallel worlds. We're plugged into the highway of mercy and a journey back to reality, whilst we are still very much experiencing what it's like to be human, but they're going on in parallel. But the predominating force, to the degree that we allow it in and connect to it, is the mercy factor. So sometimes those who are, I don't know who's instructing you, but they have access to different insights. I got an email once from my Guru Maharaj where it was actually out of the blue. I had regular communication with him, but this one was not in response to anything. And there was nothing pending, and he was not getting on my case because I hadn't done something, He wrote to me, and he wrote to me about a particular thing in my personal life. And then first when I read it, I was like, okay, I didn't actually tell him about this, but he actually, then I came to the last paragraph, and he said, you may be wondering why I'm raising this issue, since you've never spoken to me about it personally. And he said, know that sometimes Krishna directly tells the spiritual master what is going on for the disciple, so that we are able to advise accordingly. So this, sometimes we, yes, in our desire to balance the human side, must remember that there is also divinity acting. Mother Rajalila, thank you so much. I will join you guys soon. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mother Jambavati. And Yashoda Mahaprabhu, I think you asked the question about don't Guru and Krishna only really have insight into our spiritual advancement. If you are still on the call, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Haribol Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Jai, thank you so much. You are always such a breath of fresh air. It's amazing. I'm always in deep gratitude that I actually even know you. It's like, I know this person, you're like a pop star. Seriously. It was kind of in reflection of what Parameshwara's question about, advancement. And I know that there are measurements in the scriptures and in all the books about how to measure yourself as far as where you are on the journey. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I sometimes feel myself that I'm kind of allow myself to fool myself, and think that maybe I'm more advanced than I am, or even more not advanced than I am. And I was just wondering, in your heart, Krishna knows everything in your heart, and so he knows where you are. And so maybe the only person that really truly knows where you are on this path is Krishna. And that's kind of what that was.
Okay. Yeah, this is the thing, right? The mind is either trying to distract us with doubt or overconfidence, isn't it? Like you said, we either underestimate ourselves or overestimate ourselves, and both are dangerous. But there does come a point in spiritual life where the mind does move out of the way. And that's shastrically scientific. When we look from Shraddha to Prem, 75% of anarthas are gone at Nishtha. The 25% that are left afterwards are largely related to offense. And that's because we have the capacity to make offense and have to deal with the consequences of it, actually completely right up until they're not completely gone until Bhav, and they're not absolutely gone until we are actually with Krishna. Because as long as we are in the body, there's a risk of offending someone. And so there is a point, where the mind, it's kind of like your mirror when it's 75% clean, things are a little clearer, and your mind's tripping you up less with overconfidence and loss of hope, and more of the transcendental feelings and mellows of, that, we often read the prayers of the acharyas. We're like, oh my gosh, I'm the most fallen and the most, unqualified. And yet I have hope beyond hope that the Lord will accept me. And yet I am directly engaged in the service of Radha and Krishna. It's different because that the humility that comes, that arises, that shines and rises to the surface when the mind moves out of the way, is that which is born of our actual relationship with Krishna. But yes, ultimately, only Krishna knows, because only Krishna knows how he feels, right? How do I make Krishna feel? We don't always know that, because our love also has an impact on Krishna. It's not just about, do I have taste and do I have attachment? Okay, but it's Krishna receiving this. Shiva Maharaj said something a few days ago that, it's really stayed with me, that he says, Krishna really, because he made it so watertight for us to forget him, right? He has to be very, very sure that it is him that we want, above and beyond everything else. Okay, because there's always going to be some degree of attachment to people and places and things here, always, because we have to function in this world, right? Enough karma to just keep us here. But he says he has to be sure, because for him, when he gives himself, he gives himself fully. And then there's no going back.
Mm. Mm. Wow, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
We have, I would like to, for your own sake, I would like to wrap this up.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
But I would like to end with another pearl of wisdom from you. So I will ask you about, you were mentioning offense. Sometimes we call, we are desperate for attention, and that creates a hostile environment, or we become notorious in both senses, that people notice us and that we are of dubious character at that point, and we are very good at witnessing other people's avidya and ignoring our own. So how do you navigate?
That until real humility manifests in the heart, we will always notice other people's faults before our own. But when it's coupled with love and care for others, the noticing of other people's deficits and the way we relate to them is conducted in a helpful and healthy manner, right? A parent also sees all their child's deficits. Okay, they see how they're raw, they're immature, they're not yet strong, they're not yet that intelligent, they're not street smart, they're impulsive, they're emotional, they're all these different things. But they don't reject them for it. They serve them to see how they can help them grow and be stronger. So it's not so much the problem isn't observing faults. The problem is the attitude we have towards other people's faults. So we can approach other people's faults with compassion. Much like you're going back to your very first question, how do we do things outside of our nature just to make other people happy? We can do that out of compassion for others. The first offense is not killing a devotee, but killing a devotee is not just about physical destruction. It's also about destroying. What's a Vaishnava? It's a person with love for Krishna, right? Or trying to reawaken the love for Krishna. We can kill that, right? By our behavior and our words. So we can do the opposite. Instead of living in a mindset of how do I avoid killing someone's devotional creeper, how do I live in the mindset and heart set and behave and speak in a way that protects rather than kills someone's devotional creeper, that protects the body of the devotee, the mind and the heart. And so this may require actually seeing their avidya and then out of compassion, correcting it. And as we do this more for others, we're also then compassionate to ourselves when we see our own avidya. And it actually just that process itself clears our own avidya. Does that make sense?
Yes, like everything else you say, it does make sense.
Always kind to me.
Well, yeah, I think I'm more objective than kind, but sure, I'll take the compliment. I think you're a bright star in the firmament of Krishna consciousness, and you should be pointed out. Like, look at the shining, and for us to, there are so many misconceptions about women, about devotees. How long have you been a devotee? Are you a Prabhupada disciple? How many books have you distributed? How many lectures have you given? How many people know you? How many followers you have? All this stuff. But when it comes down to the brass tacks, you're just who you are, and we appreciate you, and it's more than we can hope for. All your help. I think there's one more question, but I would like to let you go. So maybe this will be the hook for you to come back, because there are still questions to be answered.
Mother Ishapanishad usually doesn't have a question. She usually is sharing her enthusiasm with all of us. May she be allowed to have 30 seconds?
Yes, certainly.
Jai Hare Krishna, Prabhu's Dandavat pranams to everyone. Hari Bol. I just wanted to comment on that last comment that you made about humility and in the offense and in the not killing, in the devotees, thou shalt not kill. And when you brought up that about humility, that was just so profound. I just wanted you to repeat it again. I just got the dead end of it, but it had impacted me in so much with what you said about how a person shows humility when you can not kill a devotee by destroying them by what you say about them. That's what I gathered from that. Could you repeat that, please?
So just to close with then, like the first offense is to kill a devotee. And most people think they're never going to make that offense because we're never going to kill someone. But we may not kill them physically, but we may kill their devotional creeper. But instead of living in a mindset of, I've got to avoid killing someone's devotional creeper, instead we can be empowered by the proactive side, which is, how can I protect someone else's devotional creeper?
Hari Bol, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Now, 1 second. You have to undergo the torture. We will give you the cacophony treatment, as we ask everybody to unmute themselves or offer their own gratitude, which I offer you wholeheartedly. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mother Tree Shakti. I really appreciate your class. Thank you for your association.
Hari Bol.
I will see some of you on the international meeting soon. Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.